Thank you for that lovely introduction just now. Good morning, everyone. I'm very proud and honoured to be giving your keynote speech this morning. This is not the first time I've spoken in this hall. I've spoken here before at a Network Rail conference, probably about 15 years ago. And I'd just like to say that it's just as daunting standing up here as it was the last time I did it. You've heard my introduction, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, except to say that I get to work across all types of infrastructure. It's one of the great things about my job is that I get to work in all types of infrastructure. And one of the things that I've learned in terms of asset management is that the assets might be different, but the organisational challenges are very much the same, regardless of the type of asset. The organisational challenges are just the same. So I'm going to take you, this is going to be what I'm going to take you through in my talk today. I'm going to talk a little bit about AtkinsRéalis and Network Rail. I'm going to talk about AtkinsRéalis as a global organisation. I'm going to talk about the industry challenges, how I think asset management can help address those challenges, and as part of that I'm going to talk a lot about alignment across an enterprise. I'm going to look at some lessons from industry that I think are applicable here, and I'll finish up with a bit more on delivering value. AtkinsRéalis has built a strong reputation as a trusted supplier to Network Rail, delivering value, innovation and reliability across a range of programmes. And you can see some of those programmes on the slide just now. Many of you, however, in the room probably still think of us as Atkins. Okay? And whilst we absolutely still have engineering design in our DNA, we've actually grown a little since we were Atkins. So we're now a global organisation, okay? 36,000 employees across all of the world. You can see there the different nationalities and the different languages. Okay, so we've become a global organisation, and as I said, engineering and engineering delivery is still in our DNA. So we support all types of infrastructure organisations, and we work in all areas. So you can see here building in places with the Government Property Agency. We work in defence, a lot of work in defence, none of which you would be surprised to know is listed on the slide. Okay. We do a lot of work in transportation. I myself are working with TransLink in Northern Ireland, and I've been working with the Toronto Metro as well. And we do a lot of work in the water industry in the UK and aviation within airports, Heathrow and Gatwick in the UK. We're also doing some work with Birmingham Airport at the moment on asset class strategies for Birmingham Airport, and we work with other airports around the world. One of the great advantages, therefore, for us is that in working across these different areas, where we see best practice in terms of asset management, in terms of engineering delivery, where we see that best practice, we're able to help translate that best practice to other areas. And that's one of the great advantages of the work that we do. So, what do we do? Well, we work across the whole life cycle of assets. The top line on this slide with the little diagrams is our corporate design blurb for what we do. The bottom line is the line that I've added, which is the asset life cycle. Okay? And the point I'm making is that we work across the whole asset life cycle, from concept and design through construction, commissioning. We do operations and maintenance and decommissioning. We work across the whole life cycle. And again, that gives us a really good picture of infrastructure and how infrastructure organizations work. So these are the main challenges, I think, that are facing the industry today. Aging and expiring assets, the budget and funding issues, and material availability and costs. These are the main challenges. And I'm going to talk to you about asset management and how asset management can help organizations that are facing these challenges work through those challenges and get better outcomes and deliver more value. But what asset management won't do for you is it won't find extra funding. Okay? And what asset management won't do for you is it won't deal with the threat of a steelworks and Scunthorpe throws it closing and you're not having anybody to make your steel rails. Asset management won't deal with that. But it will help with the things that you can control. Okay? And a dynamic asset management framework is something that I think all organizations and enterprises should be looking at to help them control the things that they can control and deliver efficiently and effectively as they can. So, what is asset management? You can see on the screen here the book definitions of asset management. The coordinated activity of an organisation to realise value from its assets. And the realisation of that value will normally involve balancing cost, risk and performance. In fact, you could describe value as paying the right cost for the best performance at an acceptable level of risk. You could define value in that way. A real-life example of value, one that's close to my heart because it's close to where I live, is the Fourth Rail Bridge. So the Fourth Rail Bridge was built in 1890. It was built just after the Tay Bridge had collapsed. So the design brief was build a bridge that will never fall down. Okay, and they did that absolutely. It's still, so built in 1890, it's still carrying 3 million passengers a year. And now that the paint issue has been solved and you don't have to paint it all the time, okay, it really is delivering value, okay, and will continue to deliver value. So that's my definition of value. The definition of asset management I prefer is the bottom definition. Managing assets so that they can provide services now and into the future. Okay? It's about being able to deliver now, but also sustaining the enterprise into the future. That's my preferred definition of asset management. What asset management is not is managing assets. And I'm going to try and explain that difference just now. So on the left-hand side of this slide, as you're looking at it, I'm sure you'll all recognize the bullet points there. Reliability, dependability, safety, asset location and condition in life, your asset databases and systems, people skills and work management, okay, budgets and KPIs. And we're all used to working with KPIs and hitting our KPIs. Just being really good at managing assets won't meet the challenges that we're facing. Okay? You need to be really good at those things. This is not an either or. You need to be really good at managing assets, but the focus needs to shift to asset management. The focus needs to shift to what is the purpose of the organization, what is the purpose of the enterprise. okay, and that you understand what value means and what the long-term outcomes are. That you've got a very holistic approach to your funding, not siloed CapEx and OpEx, but thinking across the whole. And the last two bullet points there are the ones that I think are the most important. Collaboration, breaking down silos, both internal to an organisation, but also across the supply chain. Okay, it has to work across the whole enterprise. And understanding how the assets and the supply chain actually contribute to the organisational value, to the value that the organisation is trying to deliver. Now, this is a very busy slide, and I'm not expecting you to read it all. Okay, this is a slide, and I promise it's my last asset management slide. This is a slide that I use when I'm teaching graduates about asset management and about alignment. Okay, and alignment is the top-down strategic direction informed by the bottom-up asset information. Okay, and the shift in focus that I talked about on the previous slide is absolutely key to getting that alignment across an organisation and across an enterprise. Okay, and in that way you can maximise the value that you deliver. But to do that, you have to understand and actually fully embrace the dynamic nature of this system. I've seen many organisations that have all of the component parts that are shown on this slide. So they have an asset management policy, they have a strategic asset management plan, they have an asset management planning framework, they've got all their Tier 1 and Tier 2 contracts in place, they're all set up, but they're still not actually delivering the real value that they could, because they haven't fully understood or embraced the fact that this is a very dynamic system. Okay, and I'm going to give you, hopefully, some examples of what I mean of that. So we work with Heathrow Airport. We're their asset management integrator. So we're working with their, as almost their asset management office. We work with their engineering and operations teams, but we work with their delivery vehicles as well. And it's the integration between the engineering and operations and the delivery vehicles that's key to what we're doing. And we're helping them set up for the next regulatory period. Airports, like everybody else, work in regulated periods, and we're getting their asset management systems and their asset management documentation and things like asset class strategies. We're getting them all set up for them. But I'm going to use Heathrow as an example. So this slide is a dynamic asset planning slide, or as dynamic as you can get on a single slide. All of these things existed at Heathrow when we turned up. They had an asset management policy, they had a strategic asset management plan, they had asset class strategies, what they call asset system strategies. But what they didn't have was all the feedback loops that you see on this diagram. That was something that we brought with us. And what they didn't have was the understanding of the dynamic nature of this system. And that was what we brought to them. So I'll give you an example of that. The asset class strategy for escalators. So somebody had written an asset class strategy for escalators, and they'd written it in their strategy box, not thinking that they were part of this dynamic system. And they'd looked at the risk around escalators, and they'd seen that there was more risk of injury using an escalator than there is using a lift. So they'd written in the asset class strategy, we should consider moving away from having escalators and move towards lifts. Okay, now that doesn't sound like a big thing, but you can imagine if you're a project manager and you've had a project come through that says you have to refurbish the escalators in one of the terminals. As a good project manager, you'll go and you'll look at the asset class strategy, What does the asset class strategy say? And if the first line in the asset class strategy says, we should consider moving to lifts and not having escalators, you're going to ask the question, should we be doing this refurbishment job? Is this the right job? Should I be? And a good project manager will go and check these things. Now, that takes time. There's lots of emails sent, there's Teams meetings organised, there's lots of discussions. And at the end of all of the discussions, you get back to the point of, no, we really need to refurbish these escalators. Okay, just get on and get the escalators refurbished. But that's gummed up the works. It's slowed everything down, and it's gummed up the works. And that's an actual example, so that actually happened. But when we arrived, nobody had rewritten the strategy. The strategy still said the same thing, so that was going to keep happening all the time. What the strategy should have done was gone separate to the asset class strategy document, was going to look at what we're going to do with lifts. And the actual strategy is, if we build any new terminals, okay, we'll have more lifts and escalators in the new terminals. But in existing terminals, we need to maintain all of our escalators. And we need to make sure that they're up to standard. And the new asset class strategy includes all the risk profiles, the ages, when you should invest, and everything else. And it's the risk profile that's absolutely key. So now that can flow right through into the program. It also addresses the fact that in each terminal, the escalators were all put in at the same time. So they all come up for refurbishment at the same time. And they can't all hit the capital program at the same time, so how are you going to feather that in? But this system, the dynamic bit of this system is not just that. It's the fact that in the capital program, when the refurbishment gets into the capital program, something else might come into the capital program that makes you question whether or not you could do it. So the government says, we need new scanners at all airports, and they must be in by this date. And all of a sudden there's a strain on the capital program, and you're looking at, what should I move? What should I change? Well, you might move the escalators back once you've consulted the risk profile and understood the risk profile you'd be running and agree the risk profile. Or you might say, we can't take that risk profile, you'll have to move something else. But it's a dynamic feedback loop. And if you do decide to move the refurbishment, the escalators back, then you have to tell the operator and maintenance people, because they're now operating and maintaining different assets from what they thought, because there was a capital program that said you were going to refurbish these escalators. Okay? So that's just one example of one asset class in an organisation. The point about asset management is understanding everybody who does this. The thinking about changing to lifts was not a problem, but not understanding where that asset class strategy sat in this process, that was the problem. Okay, and everybody in this process needs to understand that they're part of a dynamic process, and they have a responsibility to communicate and work with each other across the process. We're working with TransLink in Northern Ireland, and it's somewhat similar to the work that we're doing with Heathrow, where their asset management advisor, we've been working with them on putting in enterprise asset management systems, but it's actually the bottom two bullet points on here, which are the asset investment decision support tool and the asset class strategies are the key things that we're working with them on. They need those asset class strategies, and they're working on those asset class strategies, one, to inform their funding, to say long-term what they need to do to maintain ballast, rail and sleepers on specific routes, and to also then specify into their delivery the exact specification of what they want to do. So it's not just get everything back up to condition grade 1 or condition grade 2, it's what condition grade does it have to be to meet its current requirements and what's expected of it in the future. So they have route strategies that will prioritise what's in the asset class strategy, and the asset class strategy will say, if it's this route, it needs to be at this standard, if it's this route, it needs to be at this standard, and it will set out the refurbishment options for doing that. What you're doing there is you're making most of the decisions that you need to make right up front. So you don't need to further down the line get 20 people in a room to decide, should we be doing this, what should we be doing, how should we be doing it? Because you've set it all out already and you've got the framework within which to work. work flows through, everybody understands where they are and what they're doing. And I think that is one of the key things that will unlock value. Understanding your risk profiles, understanding the costs of doing the work, and properly specifying which work at the right time in the right place, okay? And not spending a lot of time trying to work out what it is that you're trying to do. This is my last example, which is the Canada line in Vancouver, in Canada. So it's an automated light rail system. It's 18.5 kilometres, 3 river crossings, 16 stations. And AtkinsRéalis designed, built, and we do the operation and maintenance. So we've got a 30-odd year operations and maintenance contract with it. So from an asset management point of view, this is nirvana, okay, because you get to control everything, okay, and you're across everything, and we got to properly apply our asset management principles across a whole job, which was fantastic. We brought it in for less capital cost than was estimated, and the maintenance and operations is currently running at less than the estimated costs as well. Okay, so we're really getting to live our asset management principles in that job. Now, the reason I've used this example is not to say asset management is easy if you control everything. What I'm actually wanting to say with this is that this is an example of how we all need to work as if we're one enterprise. Okay? We all need to think across the enterprise. We all need to think about what everybody has to do in that enterprise. Okay? How are things going to be maintained and operated? How are things going to be done? And thinking across there. Asset management, a lot of things in asset management are about breaking down silos. Okay? Silos in themselves are not bad. We all need to work in our silo. I need to work for AtkinsRéalis because that's the way I get paid every month. So I need to be in that silo. Okay? Working in the silo is not the issue. Thinking and planning in the silo is the issue. You need to think and plan across the enterprise, and that includes the supply chain all the way through. Okay. So I'm going to finish up with just a bit on delivering value through asset management. I would say this first point, given that I'm a life fellow of the Institute of Asset Management. But delivering value through asset management is a discipline that's time has really come. Okay, it's the framework. It's the best framework I'm going to state this. It's the best framework you'll find for doing this, for actually doing your thinking and planning across an enterprise. Asset management is the best framework that you'll find for doing that. By taking that asset management driven approach, by thinking about the dynamic nature of what it is that we're trying to achieve, we can all increase the value delivered. Every little bit that we add in here, every little bit that we make more effective and more efficient, okay, is going to start to drive down costs, is going to make this work a lot better. Okay, and that's the key for me. It's everybody doing that bit more effectively and more efficiently. And to do that, they need to understand they're part of a dynamic system. We need to think and plan across the enterprise. Everybody needs to be involved in the thinking and planning. The strategy can't be done, if you remember that slide further back with the pyramid on it, the strategy can't just be done at the top of the pyramid. The strategy is just done at the top of the pyramid and it ignores the rest of the pyramid. It's never going to work. Everybody involved in the enterprise needs to understand what it is that the enterprise is trying to achieve. Okay? We need to be super collaborative. Okay? The more collaborative we are, the more that we work together, the more that we think across what we do, the more we'll all benefit from this, okay? And the more value we'll deliver. And my last point is that there is so much work to be done, okay, that we have to do this. And if you'll indulge me for a moment, it's not just in the railway, okay? If you look across the UK at the moment, you've got nuclear power plants, Hinkley C, you've got Rolls-Royce small medium reactors being rolled out. There's National Grid are trying to spend a third more than they've ever spent before reinforcing the grid. The water companies have got a Victorian sewage system that they have to try and turn into a modern sewage system. Okay, you've got there's a submarine fleet, a whole new submarine fleet coming, and all of the ancillaries that are needed to manage a submarine fleet need to be built. And then you've got housing that needs to be built all across the country. The amount of work that needs to be done in the UK is fantastic. Great time to be an engineer in the UK. When I listed all the things here on my notes, the thing that jumped to mind was John F. Kennedy's speech. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Okay, what we can do, I'm absolutely convinced of this, what we can do is embrace the dynamic nature of asset management across all the engineering, design and delivery that we do, and always be thinking about how we can work more effectively and more efficiently, and not just to deliver today, but for that sustainable future. Okay, we can do this. Okay, and we need to do it. It won't be done in the 5 years the government says. Okay, it'll take a lot longer than that. But the point is that we have to do this, and we have to get this to work. And the railways are an incredibly important part of all of that. And that, everybody, is my keynote for this morning. Thank you very much.